Do you like your cocktails filled with flavour? Of course you do. I can't imagine anyone answering no to that. Well, you've come to the right place because in this video I'm going to show you how to make some super easy modifiers at home or in a bar. What are modifiers, I hear you ask? Well, lots of things, but here we're looking at what I like to call the flavour makers. Syrups, oleos and shrubs. I'll explain those last two in a minute. These not only make cocktails taste great, but they also help make amazing non-alcoholic drinks. With modern bartending emphasising sustainability and seasonality, it makes sense that we're kind of revisiting ancient methods of preservation and they're having a bit of a moment. One dusty bottle of bright pink grenadine in your arsenal might have been okay once, but it's just not going to cut it anymore. So let's take a look at some of the common forms of these non-alcoholic flavour modifiers, the differences between them, the techniques behind them, and most importantly, how to make them. Before we do though, many thanks to Chance, Matthias, Rory, Jeff and Ronald, who have all signed up to support us on Patreon. If you'd also like to help us keep making content, or you want more behind the bar content like Q&As and behind the scenes and lots of other fun stuff, then head over to patreon.com/withcaradivine to find out more. Defined is a thick, sweet liquid made by dissolving sugar in water. Most of you will have used at least a simple sugar syrup if you've ever made a cocktail, but they're also one of the oldest ways of preserving fruit and so on because sugar acts as a preservative. Cordials are another version of this. They used to contain alcohol, but nowadays usually don't, and the term syrup or cordial can generally be used pretty interchangeably. Although, if we are going to get technical, then cordials are often based on fruit juice, while syrups are still just based on water. At their simplest, they're just going to be the fruit and sugar, but you can also layer in different flavours by adding spices or herbs while cooking. And this gives you a single cocktail ingredient, which is actually introducing multiple flavours and complexity. Always a win. And doubly good if you do prefer non-alcoholic drinks that aren't your regular soda or soft drinks. Oleo Saccharum may sound like a bit of a mouthful, but don't be scared. This ingredient is nowhere near as complicated as it sounds and has been used in drinks since the very first punch recipes started floating around in the 1600s, before cocktails were even a twinkle in the eye. The literal meaning is oil sugar, and the idea is that the rough sugar granules can extract all of the flavourful oils from the citrus skins just by rubbing up against it, and it gives a really delicious perfumed oil to use in drinks. There are a few advantages to this. One is that so much citrus juice is used in cocktails that this is an awesome way to make sure that you're getting full use of all parts of your lemons. Another is that since no heat is applied in the process, the end flavour is as fresh and zingy as you could hope for. And similarly, since no water is added, it's a really concentrated flavour. And this is why it works so well in punches, because it doesn't get lost when they're lengthened out with water or juice. As Jerry Thomas said, to make a punch of any sort in perfection, the ambrosial essence of the lemon must be extracted. And luckily, a new generation of bartenders are coming back round to this way of thinking. There are two types of shrubs, one which is sort of similar to a punch and does include alcohol, but more commonly nowadays we're talking about the sweetened vinegar-based syrup version. Now, shrubs are proof that not all cocktail fads should be dismissed. They exploded back onto the scene a couple of years ago and were just on every single menu everywhere, but they have proven their staying power because of that vinegar backbone. This means that as much as they are a sweet component, like the syrups or oleos, they also sort of BYO acid, which makes it a balanced ingredient in its own right. Every bartender's dream, and ideal if you don't always have access to fresh citrus. Both types of shrubs evolved from sherbets, which is a drink with roots in sort of Persia and Turkey and that area. These early concoctions were often made with lemon juice, but as their popularity spread to Britain and the colonies, where lemons didn't grow too well, vinegar started being used as the acidic component. Now you can make as many settlers did and spike them with your spirit of choice, but these are also a really easy and delicious non-alcoholic option, just lengthened out with soda water. So, now you know what the hell I'm talking about and why they're awesome, let me show you how to make them. This is such an easy one and can be substituted into lots of cocktails which call for anything like grenadine or raspberry syrup, but it also has enough going on in there that it can be used with just some lemon juice and some soda, and of course, gin or whiskey if you feel like it. Of course, if berries are in season, then use fresh, but otherwise frozen packs work really well and you can always have them to hand in your freezer, so that's actually quite a good option for this one. And you can use whichever spices you have as well. Feel free to adjust the sweetness to your own palate. It's really not a particularly strict recipe. So for our spiced berry syrup, we're gonna start with 500 grams of mixed berries, like so. Obviously, as I said, feel free to use fresh if you'd prefer. I just find these really handy because you can kind of have them in the freezer and use them whenever you need. And obviously, if you prefer just raspberries or, just blackcurrants or whatever, then you can go for that as well. But we're gonna go for all of them, blackberries, raspberries, and blueberries. So you just wanna let them defrost a little bit and then you can pop them straight in your saucepan. Then we need 250 grams of sugar, so I'm going for half on this one. Obviously you can do it a little bit less if you want it to be tartar, a little bit more if you prefer sweeter. And I'm just using caster sugar for this one. It's really, all of these recipes you want to think of more like cooking. You don't really have to be scared of them. You don't have to be exactly precise, just, make it taste good. And then it's obviously gonna taste good in cocktails at the end of it. So you can weigh that out, or honestly, you can just measure it in the jug as well, but I do have a little scale here. And then just about 250 mils of water, so really just to kind of make it liquid so that it can bubble away there nicely. Now, as for the spices, this is really very much up to your own preference. I've kind of gone slightly more wintry ones here, so your sort of cloves, cinnamon and cardamom. You can do something like, using herbs, so like thyme works really well instead for something a little bit kind of brighter and more summery. Or, you could just stick with one other flavor, so maybe just the berries and cinnamon is quite a nice one, and you just put a little bit more in there if you just want it to be a more intense flavor of a specific thing. But we're just going for a little bit of a general, all kinds of spices, all kinds of berries here. So about 6 cloves. And then just a couple of cardamom pods. I do find it quite a strong flavor, so I definitely wouldn't really go more than 2 unless you do tend to just really like that. 1 stick of cinnamon. I'm just gonna use to give it a little stir here as well. And then actually just a couple of strips of lemon peel just to kind of brighten everything up and give it that nice little bit of citrus note as well. So that's it, nice and easy. You can go and make yourself a cup of tea or have a gin and tonic or whatever while this just bubbles away. It's kind of a, you sort of just want to keep an eye on it really. And so once all the berries start to disintegrate, there's not heaps of water in here, so we're not going to reduce it down too much because I don't want it to go into like a real kind of stewed fruit taste. I still, like for it to get too jammy. I still want it to taste quite nice and fresh. So we're probably looking at about sort of 15 to 20 minutes just to get everything sort of nicely integrated and the right sort of consistency. If you are using an induction heater that you've never used before, then you should probably keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't almost boil over. Obviously that was just boiling for a minute, so hopefully it's not ruined, but you don't actually want it to boil because then that's where you get, again, that quite stewed and jammy kind of cooked note from, rather than it still being nice and bright and fresh and quite like tart as well. So it's getting to the point where all the berries have started to kind of break down. It's got, a bit more of a syrupy texture. Do bear in mind when you're doing this kind of thing, when something cools down, it gets more viscous. So you don't actually want to take it to like a really thick syrup when it's hot, because then it will be like, you won't be able to pour it by the time it's actually cooled down. So this is kind of, definitely like it coats the spoon, but definitely still able to move around quite nicely. And then just have a little taste of it, same as with any kind of cooking. The spices are coming through really nicely. You can definitely get that nice hit of lemon as well. Obviously, if you felt like you weren't really getting anything, you could either give it a bit longer to sort of all come together a little bit more, or add some more in. Everything's doing what we want it to in there at the moment. Christmassy. Perfect, so now this is all good to go. We can strain it out. Obviously just be careful, don't burn yourself. Try not to make as much of a mess as I am. Probably should have brought a bigger jug and strainer, but that's all right. Then you can just give it a little stir. Try not to push too hard. Raspberries can actually be quite bitter in the seeds and things, so you don't actually want to be kind of pushing that into the syrup. You just want to make sure that you get all of that nice liquid out. I knew it was a bit risky wearing such a light coloured top making syrups today. But it's also essentially a jam at this point, so if you wanted to keep it and use it on your toast, then you absolutely can as well. But yeah, bomba is usually just like our house baked sourdough done on the char grill, and then like just a big dollop of that if you haven't had breakfast in the morning. Is probably not the healthiest way to start your day, but plenty of energy in it for a short burst anyway. So this can really, it just needs to cool now, and then it will absolutely be good to go. All you need to do is grab a little bottle of some kind. I like these little ones because they're 500 mils, so it's usually quite a good amount for sort of something that's perishable. Obviously, I mean, I don't know how many cocktails you're making at home, but you probably won't go through that much, so you don't really want to have heaps and heaps of it, and the less air in there, the better. So then you can just funnel that in. So that can just get stored in your fridge. The sugar works as a preserving agent, so you know it's going to last a little while, but it's not going to last forever. In the bar, we only ever really keep syrups and things around for 1 week, maybe maximum 2, but we're obviously going through a lot of volume of them. At home, I'm not going to lie to you, I've definitely had some syrups kind of sit in the back on the fridge and be forgotten about for even a month or maybe even a little bit more, and they've been fine. So kind of the same as everything. This is not medical advice, but just use your nose, use your eyes, figure out if it starts to get fizzy. So fermenting would be one thing that it can do to go off. So if it's at all fizzy when you open it up, then don't use it. And obviously if it starts to go moldy, then you'll probably figure out that it's not correct anymore, but hopefully you'll have so many cocktails before then that it won't matter too much. And when you are using this kind of thing, again, it does get a little bit more like actual cooking. It's not just a straight sort of 1 part water to 1 part sugar syrup. You've got the kind of various levels of sweetness from the berries, a little bit of citrus notes, those kind of warming spices, which can make things taste a little bit sweeter as well. So generally, if you're substituting it into a cocktail, just always use a little bit less. I usually just start about kind of 5 mils less. You can see how well it comes through in the final drink, and then just up it from there, and you can't really go wrong in that way. A little spiced berry syrup. Again, this is an infinitely adaptable recipe depending what citrus you have around. Grapefruits, oranges and lemons all work really well, and we did used to do a mandarin one at Bomba, which was delicious with tequila. In a bar environment, it's really helpful if you have a vacuum pack machine, because you can do larger quantities and seal it, and that kind of removes all the air and just means that it's rubbing up against each other nice and tight, and then just leave it to do its thing overnight with minimal effort. It does still definitely work at home, but just leave it covered at room temperature rather than in the fridge. And you want to give it a good pound with like a muddler or something to start off, and then stir a few times if and when you remember. So your best friend for making an Oleo is going to be your little peeler here. As I said, it really doesn't matter what citrus you're using. They all give off, a lime Oleo is really good as well. So really probably just want to be thinking about what else, are you going to maybe juice some orange juice for your breakfast, or some grapefruit juice, or the obvious ones are more lemon and lime because you obviously use them in cocktails a lot. But I just thought I'd do a little melange today and see how that turned out. So we'll go for 1 orange. For your lemons, if you can get unwaxed, that's best. That's obviously going to kind of not have anything then blocking the oils from coming out. And also with all of the fruit, obviously just make sure that you give it a good rinse, because you are kind of really extracting everything from the skin there. Probably this is a situation where if you can lean towards organic, that's a bit nicer. But I'm sure that you know yourself, sort of whether or not you're stressed too much about that kind of thing. The other thing that we use the kind of leftover fruit for at Bomba is sangria. It's a pretty good way of getting rid of heaps of skinned fruit. So we just chop that up and put a dash of some vermouth and some gin and a little bit of lemon juice over there, and that just makes kind of almost a little fruit salad that you can pop into your sangria mix. So a nice little summer treat there. boy. Alright, so once you have your little bowl full of your peels there, then you can add, if you want to do some spices or some other kind of seasoning. Again, definitely not necessary, just the citrus alone is still delicious. But something like some cloves can work really well, or what I'm actually going to go for is pink peppercorns. So I think these are maybe actually native to Australia. I certainly hadn't seen them before I came over here, but they grow all over Melbourne. So this is these ones are bought, they were farmed, I guess, but this is kind of an actual, like, you know, real life foraged one that we found on the way in here. So they're a really pretty color, and it's just got a bit of a gentler and sort of sweeter pepper spice than black peppercorns. So they work really well in these kind of lighter and brighter type syrups and things, because it doesn't kind of overpower, but does just give that little kind of prickle of heat. It's actually a really pretty little garnish as well. If you can get, like, when you get kind of the smaller ones, the leaves and things are really nice too. So as you can probably tell by now, I'm quite a kind of, you know, just go by eye, and I'm not the most precise sort of cook in the world. So when it comes to preparing these sort of syrups and things, I tend to do it more by just eye and taste. So, you know, a good little handful or a couple of handfuls of pink peppercorns. And again, with sugar, you could do it according to weight, but you know, basically what's going to happen is all the juice is going to leach out from the skins and kind of just turn it into a syrup anyway, and anything that's left over you just kind of can mix through until it's dissolved. So you really don't have to be too careful about this. It's not sort of, again, it's not, you're not looking for an exact ratio or anything like that in particular. Generally go about 1 to 1, but I do usually just eyeball it. So once that's all covered, you can grab a little muddler and just start getting it going. Kind of want to make sure that each individual little strip of zest here is, you know, nicely coated in sugar, and this obviously then crushes up if you've popped any spices in there as well and starts getting them working. So there you are, so everything's kind of nicely coated, and there is a little bit of excess sugar in there, but that's not a bad thing, because as the oils leach out, then that's all going to dissolve and just give you a little bit more volume. So this guy can just get covered up and popped somewhere safe. Just don't pop it in the fridge, because if you do, then the cold just means that the reaction doesn't happen sort of quite as quickly. So if you do want it to happen, you know, within a few hours, then definitely out on the workbench or whatever, as long as it's covered, then it'll be totally fine. And then get to do a little Blue Peter. Here's one I prepared earlier. So this is kind of what happens to it overnight. So you basically got sort of candied peels at this point, and then a nice little syrup. Just give it a good stir to make sure that everything's as dissolved and you're getting kind of as much of it as possible. And then we can just strain it out. So this is obviously not the most efficient syrup making process. It doesn't give you heaps and heaps, but what you do get is a really quite concentrated and intense flavour. So quite often you'd only need, you know, maybe 5 or 10 mils of this per drink when you just want to kind of zest it up. And then if you are looking at something, you know, making something bigger scale, like doing a punch, or if you are doing it in a bar situation, then you obviously just want to scale up that recipe, you know, by however many times you want. So yeah, I reckon you've only got about kind of 30 mils in there, but it's really quite like thick. And then the other thing you can do if you are using it straight away is then just squeeze some of the citrus that you've just used and use the fresh juice and mix that in, and it's essentially kind of like a homemade sour mix. So you've got, you know, your kind of strong acid and all of the really kind of pithy and zesty notes from the actual skin, and then also your sugar in there already. So, you know, literally just that little bit of gin or tequila or whatever, and then topped up with soda water is pretty darn delicious. It's really good. The pink peppercorn really comes through as well and makes it really poppy, which is fun. But it is quite, you know, you've still almost got that like bit of kind of sugar texture going on as well. So it is really, really rich. Like you're probably looking at this being almost like a 3-to-1 sugar syrup in terms of the intensity and the sweetness, but with all of that bright and fresh citrus notes as well. Oleo Saccharum. This recipe almost starts out life as an Oleo. So the pineapple gives off lots of juice when covered in sugar and sort of creates its own syrup. Again, the spices are optional and totally up to your own taste, so feel free to experiment with some different flavor combinations there. And if you can find a vinegar to complement the flavors that you're after, that's great. I used to have a supermarket near Bomba which had an amazing range of fruit vinegars, which actually had a pineapple one, which was awesome for this, but sadly it's closed now. So I'm just going with apple cider vinegar, or white wine vinegar is also a good choice because they're fruity and still quite delicate. So first of all, we just have to cut up this guy. I do quite enjoy that he's just decided to grow his hat sideways. Then we're just gonna cut it into little chunks. Again, really doesn't matter. They don't have to be particularly even or anything, but you do just want them to be quite, you know, like on the smaller side, because that just gives a bit more surface area for the sugar to go to work on there. Then we're just gonna slice a little kind of knob of ginger. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty lazy and I really hate peeling ginger. Luckily, this is young ginger, so the skin is really, really thin, if you can see, but it just kind of, yeah, it's not all kind of dry and rough either, so I wouldn't even bother skinning it, just to give it a little chop up as well. It's just gonna bring a really lovely kind of warm spice to this. And then we just need some allspice as well. Obviously, you can probably tell that my idea here is that this goes really well with rum in sort of more tropical drinks, but again, you can definitely adapt it. You know, if you maybe wanted to do, you know, ginger, but then with something maybe like some clove or something sort of a little bit warmer, some star anise actually goes really nicely with either gin or tequila. That kind of slightly aniseed flavor. So again, very, very adaptable. And you can, you know, obviously leave the ginger out if you don't like that, all of that kind of thing. That's really very much just a kind of base recipe to build on here. So I'm just gonna do a little bartender rough mortar and pestle here. So using my tin and my muddler. Let's go, we'll go 6. I think I said 4, but it's no bad thing to have a little bit more. Bash that up a little bit, and then it goes in here. And then with this, we're just going to cover it with some sugar. Again, roughly 1-to-1 is pretty good, but I usually just eyeball it, give it a shake. Again, make sure that everything's kind of nicely covered. I'm using a raw sugar here, cane sugar, which I know kind of all sugar is cane, but I guess a more unrefined one. And I just feel like that slightly darker sugar flavor does actually work quite nicely with all the spice and things that we have going on in here. And that's that. So just nicely covered, every bit's coated there, a little bit of excess, but not too much sugar. And you can literally, again, just leave that out at room temperature and let it do its juicy thing. And here's one I prepared earlier. So heaps of liquid, which is good. So time to be strained. I'm gonna learn from my mistake. So I'm gonna go for a bit of a bigger strainer this time. So I'll just give that a little taste. It's really good, heaps of pineapple flavor, and it's still really bright and fresh. Obviously that's a very good, or you know, a reason for using this technique over just cooking it like a regular syrup, because you don't get any kind of darker, kind of caramelized or cooked flavors in there. It's actually still got quite a good amount of acid come out from in the pineapple juice. So we're probably not gonna have to use quite as much apple cider vinegar as we maybe would if we'd cooked it down and kind of caused all the sugars to caramelize and just created that bit of a kind of darker sweetness to it. So in here we've got about 400 mils, so I'm gonna go with roughly a third of that, so a little bit over 100. I reckon that's really good. You wouldn't want to go much more. Like it's definitely, the vinegar is quite present there, and that real kind of mouth-watering acid. Obviously, if you're using sort of a sweeter fruit, or even depending on how sweet your pineapple is, you could potentially go a little bit more. And then also depending, you know, what style of drink you're wanting to use it in and how present you want the vinegar to be, you can dial it back a little bit as well. For kind of what I have in mind for this drink, I reckon that's going to be quite bang on balance wise. So you've got, you know, sweet and fruity and acidic, and then also that little bit of very kind of slight spice from the ginger and allspice. So it's very much an all-encapsulating cocktail ingredient. Then you can bottle it up. And then you just want to keep it in the fridge. This obviously does have some vinegar in there as well, which is a kind of quite a powerful preservative, even more so than just the sugar. I mean, I don't actually know the science behind that, but shrubs definitely do last that bit longer. If you keep it in the fridge, then that will go right through for a month or so. So it's a pretty good one just to have to hand at all times. Pineapple shrub. So now you know. If you've made it this far, then thank you. We love that you're enjoying this content. Some of our subscribers have been in contact wondering if we're actually still making content, and this was a bit of a surprise because the answer is most certainly yes. We haven't missed a week, and we often actually put out additional bonus content. So if you have been missing our videos, then there's a couple of ways that you can make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Obviously make sure that you've subscribed and hit the notification bell, but you can also head over to our website withcaradivine.com and sign up to our newsletter. It's a soon to be regular rundown of what we've been up to, what's coming up, and any other exciting news we've got to share. And you can also, of course, follow us on any of the social media channels in the descriptions below.